talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to Connecticut.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Tuesday afternoon edition, Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. I'll just, not beat around the bush here. It's a very busy day. It's a very important day. So one, I appreciate you making a little bit of time to join us. And most importantly, I just hope that I can give you about an hour of something or, 40 minutes or whatever of something to listen to. Maybe you're in line to vote. Maybe you've already voted. Maybe you're avoiding all political stuff. So we are just here to have fun, really just react to day one of the college hoop season. Nothing else there. All I'll say from the politics side, I do encourage you to go vote. It is a civic right and responsibility. And that's about all you'll get from Torres on politics today. Like I said, it is a busy day. It is a fun day, though, man. College hoops was back, and it was awesome. You looked at all day long. The Field of 68 had their stream early in the day. Later in the day, Duke's playing, Kentucky's playing, Carolina's playing into the late games, into Gonzaga, Baylor at 11:30 Eastern time. So we're going to react to it all. We'll start with that Gonzaga-Baylor game. Gonzaga destroying the Bears. What does it mean? Gonzaga maybe a little bit better than we even thought. From there, we'll talk about some of the other big games. The only two real upsets, Ohio State beating Texas, Texas A&M losing to UCF. And then we'll rip through the rest of a busy opening night of college football. Cooper Flagg played for Duke. Carolina kind of struggled a little bit in the SEC. Bama looked awesome. Kentucky looked awesome. I got to give a shout out to Louisville, to UCLA. And then we will wrap, by the way, with a little bit of recruiting news. BYU pulling in a top 25 prospect class of 2025. Why that is important, it sure feels like the winds are blowing towards A.J. Debonsa being a Cougar. So we will discuss all that. Again, just a fun, loose show. Drop your comments, drop your thoughts from day one of the college basketball season, in the chat. And should mention college football will be back to the normal schedule there, previewing the weekend ahead on the next episode. With that said, before we get started, as always, make sure you're subscribed to Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're closing in on 46,000 subscribers. I want to get to 50K before the new year. I think it can happen. Cannot do it without your support. Tag a friend, send a friend this show so we can keep setting records, kicking butt, and taking names. Also, before we get started, speaking of kicking butt, there is no company that is kicking butt right now like Callie Puffs, CalliePuffs.com. We are so privileged to have them as a partner of the Aaron Torres Pod. So I've told you the story. It's football season. You're on the couch. You're looking for something healthy to eat, but also delicious. And that's where Callie Puffs comes in. Family-owned company, not far from where I live. My buddy Joey owns the company, and I'm here to tell you he's no different than you and I. Small kids trying to figure out what are they going to eat? What can I eat that is healthy, but also delicious? And that's where he came up with Callie Puffs. These are the delicious alternative to Doritos, Fritos, whatever you get in your grocery aisle with all the healthy active ingredients. Baked, not fried, avocado oil. But again, the bottom line is they taste delicious. At this point, I've told you about them. Don't take my word for it. Try them out for yourself. Go to CalliePuffs.com. That's CAULIPUFFS.com. Also, can order Callie Puffs on Amazon.com. Maybe you heard of them. Maybe you heard of Amazon. Throw a couple bags in your cart. Try them out for yourself. Again, this is the alternative to the crap in your grocery aisle. You want to eat healthy. Maybe it's Thanksgiving time. You want to bring a healthy snack to the dinner table that also tastes good. Try Callie Puffs. Tell them Torres sent you. You will like them. With that said, it is a busy Tuesday pretty much everywhere. But it was a busy Tuesday in college hoops. And so with that said, there is no more time to waste. So let's get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day, college hoops is here. Let me just start by saying this. I'll be very brief. I don't want to be negative. I'm usually glasses half full, Torres. college hoops has to have the worst opening day of any sport anywhere in America. Okay. Bottom line, listen, if you're not a diehard, I don't even know how many people knew college hoops was going on. By the way, credit to the crew at Field of 68. They streamed 3 games from Sioux Falls. I thought they did an awesome job with that. And so at least the Field of 68 got people going. There weren't a ton of big games. I don't even know how many people know on the national scale that college hoops has started. If you're watching this show, if you're listening to this show, you care though. And so when Torres is in charge, we'll make sure opening day is a little bit of a bigger deal. But let's focus on the one big game that did matter, the one big game that everybody wanted to watch, even if they're bleary-eyed here on a Tuesday after watching it. And it is Gonzaga facing Baylor. The only top 25 matchup of opening night, the only top 10 matchup of opening night, and Baylor goes to Gonzaga, and the Zags absolutely destroy Baylor. Final score is 101-63. The Baylor Bears, first time in school history they lose, or first time under Scott Drew that they lose by 30-plus points. Now listen, this is college basketball. We don't have to overreact to every result. This isn't college football. One loss doesn't hamper your season. Credit, by the way, to Baylor for flying out to the West Coast and playing this game on opening night. By the way, no rest for the weary with Baylor. They go to Dallas and play Arkansas on Saturday. But at the same time, to me, the story here is Gonzaga. And listen, I'll be transparent. For any Gonzaga fan watching, I was one of those guys that as things kind of went sideways the last year or two, 2 years ago, Drew Timme, I thought kind of elevated the program. Last year you struggled. And I said, look, are the best days of Gonzaga behind him? I was one of those guys. I'm guilty of it. Well, as it turns out, Mark Few figured it out, as he always does. They go to the Sweet 16 last year. And what I saw on Monday night was a team that basically returns everybody. I believe it's 7 of the top 8 scorers off that Sweet 16 team. They are confident. They are good at what they do. And they just played like a team that has played together for years upon years at this point. And when I look at Gonzaga, that was one of the reasons I was so high on them. Listen, this isn't the old days. I don't know if they have 2, 3, 4 NBA guys on that roster like they did back in the day. But at the same time, the one thing we have seen in college hoops over the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, it is that continuity matters, retention matters, player development matters. Just look at Dan Hurley. I just saw Dan Hurley a minute ago on the Pat McAfee show, and he's talking about our key players are the sophomores that decided to stay rather than transfer even after they didn't play. Well, I bring it up because you look at Gonzaga, they bring back pretty much everybody, and it shows. It shows in the fact that in this game, it was close for about 8-9 minutes. I think it was 18-11 at the under 12 timeout. And then, boom, it's 49-30 at halftime, 19-point lead at halftime. You outscore Baylor by 19 more in the second half, leading to that 28-point win. But more than just that, 5 different players, finish in double figures. And what I saw from Gonzaga was a program that through the years, they have done their best work in player development and guys staying in the program and getting better. And to me, that's exactly what we saw on Monday night. Dusty Stromer was a kid last year, was a true freshman, probably thrown into the fire a little bit too early, honestly. Well, he comes back. He has 11 points last night, 3 of 5 from 3. He looked really good. It was really when he started playing well that Gonzaga blew the game open. Braden Huff, another kid, I believe he did this crazy thing called redshirt and didn't go anywhere. He just stayed at Gonzaga and got better. 14 points off the bench with Nolan Hickman, Graham Ike, and Caliph Battle also scoring in double figures. That's the other thing about Gonzaga as well, is that, listen, I think as we get deeper into this portal era, remember, the COVID waiver is going away after this season. And so I bring it up, there's going to be fewer players in the portal. I think the stat is that 1 out of every 5 players was basically a COVID player, a player with an extra year of eligibility. So to me, the portal going forward is going to be much more like free agency. You're not going to be able to get 8, 9, 10 impact players out of the portal like a lot of teams have done over the last couple of years. It's going to be, can you keep your roster together? Can you retain your roster? And then can you add a piece or two that kind of complements the guys that you already have? Well, the one thing they were probably lacking last year was a little bit of scoring punch. They go get Caliph Battle. We saw him in Arkansas last year. If you remember, it was like the final 5-6 games of the season. Arkansas fans, you can let me know. I think he averaged like 31 points a game over the final 5, something like that. So he adds 12 points as the fifth starter for Gonzaga. The Michael Ajayi kid from Pepperdine looked really good. And to me, we don't have to overreact, but Gonzaga certainly looks the part of a team that is going to be a factor all season long. By the way, good news with Gonzaga, you know that you're going to see them often and early, and we're going to figure out just how good they are because they play throughout the next few weeks. They play Kentucky and Seattle. They play UConn at Madison Square Garden. They play the Battle for Atlantis, where they could face Arizona, where they could face Louisville, where they could face Indiana. And so with Gonzaga, just thought it was a really, really, really solid win. From the Baylor perspective, listen, I'm not going to overreact, but it is worth noting, a couple marquee returnees, but they were really a team that was built through the portal and high school ranks. And sometimes it takes longer, and that's okay. The key in this one, they really had 3 marquee players that they added to this roster. Jeremy Roach, transfer from Baylor, Norchad Omier, transfer from Miami, and then VJ Edgecombe, the 5-star freshman guard. Well, VJ Edgecombe and Jeremy Roach combined to shoot, I believe, 4 of 20 from the field. That's not going to get the job done, 13 points combined. And that's honestly the difference in the game. I mean, they just got nothing out of their backcourt. Omier looked pretty good, 15 points in this game, as well as on top of that, he finished with 9 boards. Why that's noteworthy, I think, is a little bit worth noting. Of course, Baylor will play Arkansas this coming Saturday. That's interesting because Arkansas could be down Jonas Adu, who has not played in their exhibition games. So you wonder if Baylor could have a potential advantage in the front court. Not going to worry about Baylor. As I said, they're 2-star guards, shoot 4 of 20 from the field, and that'll do you in. That'll do you in on a day like this. So credit to Baylor, credit to Gonzaga, for Baylor. I'm not worried. We're going to see him again this weekend in Dallas. And by the way, I will say, like, VJ Edgecombe, he had 1 or 2 plays that you were just like, oh yeah, I see why that kid is a potential lottery pick. So Gonzaga improves to 1-0, Baylor 0-1. Shout out, by the way, to the real ones that stayed up all night to watch this one. Even I turned it a little bit early. It was about 10 p.m. Pacific, 1 a.m. on the East Coast, but Gonzaga holds off. Gonzaga gets the win. All right, I'll tell you what. This is what we're going to do. It's early, but we'll take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll react to the rest of opening night in college hoops. There are some things I got to get to with Ohio State, with Bama, with Kentucky. The list goes on and on, plus some big BYU recruiting news. We'll take a quick early break. Be right back. Before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what, do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more, all available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. Mora Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast Questions @gmail.com. All right, everybody, I am back. Good to be back. So let's go ahead and get to the rest of the opening night of college hoops. I was going to say the week whatever slate, but we're talking college hoops today. We will be back with college football on Friday's show, but it was a fun night. It was awesome to just have all these games on. Let's just go ahead. listen, I'm not going to spend, this isn't the typical Torres, 14-minute monologue on each team. Let's just kind of go through the rest of the big games, the results that mattered, on and on and on. Let's start. First game that I do want to hit on, really the only other marquee-ish game on the docket. Texas was ranked in the top 25 coming in. Ohio State was not. Well, Ohio State, the start to finish 80-72 victory. And boy, oh boy, what a start for their new head coach, Jake Diebler. And it's funny, when I think about Ohio State, I go back to the springtime. If you remember in the spring, Chris Holtmann gets fired as the head coach of Ohio State. I believe it was Valentine's Day, like on the day, okay? And so I only bring it up because what stands out to me is after that, Diebler comes in as the interim. There's no real expectation of him as a head coach. It's just, we just got to get till the end of the season. Well, I bring it up because he takes over the job. And the next thing, remember, first game out of the gate, what does he do? He beats Purdue. Number 1 Purdue at the time. The Purdue Boilermakers was Zach Edey. By the way, Purdue didn't look very good when they didn't have a plus 90 free throw discrepancy yesterday, but that's another conversation for another day. But Purdue, he beats Purdue. They go 7-1 in the regular season. They win a game in the conference tournament. And it's crazy. I remember where I was when he was officially named the Ohio State head coach, because when he even as an intern, I think we all thought, okay, it's a cool story, but it's Ohio State. Remember, Chris Holtmann has the biggest buyout that we know of in basketball, college basketball buyout history. So they paid Chris Holtmann $13-14 million to go away. And I think the assumption was they're going to go out and get a big name. Go get a Sean Miller from Xavier. Go get a, Dusty May, who ended up at Michigan. By the way, I'm not going to talk about Michigan. They looked awesome last night, okay? But I just bring it up because Diebler comes in. They give him the job. And I really thought when he got the job, that was an indictment because they did it early in the process. It was interesting to me, Ohio State, with all the money they have, even if they're a football school, it was clear to me that they believed in this guy. And to their credit, they came out looking smart because they go out and beat Texas on opening night. And they looked the part. They looked like a really good top 25 type team. In terms of the team, the guard play really led them. Bruce Thornton is a returning player. Thought he looked really good. Thought it was interesting. First of all, a couple interesting transfers. Remember Aaron Bradshaw from Kentucky? He's on Ohio State now. Sean Stewart, another former McDonald's All-American. He's on Ohio State now, played at Duke last year. But you look at this team, it was the guards. It was Bruce Thornton. It was a team that kind of looked new age, right? I think it's so interesting. All these young coaches kind of bring in these new concepts. Well, Ohio State finishes 14-28 shooting from 3. And they just look like a really, really good team. The other kid that stood out, by the way, the kid John Mobley Jr., Ohio State fans, I was not familiar with John Mobley Jr.'s game. Freshman from Ohio. He's played at a couple of the different prep schools. I didn't know much about him. And I tweeted it. And I got body bagged by our Torres on Ohio State account. Our Torres on Ohio State were like, we've been tweeting about this for years. What are you talking about? Well, he looked awesome. 14 points off the bench. Credit to Ohio State. Credit to Diebler, that game 1 win. And I'll tell you, Big Ten, remember, there's really no dominant team in that league this year. We'll get to UCLA later. We'll get to USC later, both in the Big Ten. Both looked good on opening night, but Purdue has question marks. Michigan State has question marks. Indiana's got a lot of talent, but can they put it together? So Ohio State fits the bill. They got to give them credit. They win on opening night. From the Texas side of things, listen, when we did our reaction to the AP Top 25, I was like, I don't think Texas is a top 25 team. I like the pieces. I don't love the pieces. Jordan Pope, a transfer from Oregon State, I think is a little bit underrated. But really, outside of Trey Johnson, the 5-star freshman from Texas, nobody really came to play on Monday night. To their credit, Trey Johnson did play very well. 29 points, 5 of 10 shooting from 3. It was interesting. The TNT crew, the game was on TNT. They were gushing about him. Now, I find it a little bit annoying when it's a largely NBA announcing crew and all they want to talk about is, well, this guy's an NBA this, and he's a lottery pick, and he's a... Same time, he did look the part. 29 points, 5 of 10 shooting from 3. Outside of that, Texas, a lot of big pieces, a lot of big names that just didn't really look ready to go, basically, for lack of a better term. Arthur Kluma came from Kansas State. Caden Shedrick came from Virginia. The one guy I actually thought looked pretty good, Julian Larry off the bench from Indiana State. 8 points, 1 of 3 shooting from 3, but I just think he looks like a very nice bench player for them. So Texas, it'll be interesting. Listen, you can't say they're not battle tested because they came from the Big 12 and they made the NCAA tournament in the Big 12 last year. So I don't want to dismiss them, don't want to discredit them, but listen, I think they're a middle to the bottom of the pack in the SEC. As we're seeing in SEC football, the truth of the matter is that there can be some really good teams that finish in the middle and the bottom of the pack, and I think Texas is it. Because when I look at Texas on paper, I don't think they're better than Bama. I don't think they're better than Auburn. I don't think they're better than Arkansas. I don't think they're better than Kentucky. I don't think they're better than Ole Miss, ironic because of who Ole Miss's coach is. So I could keep going, but it's like, again, it's like the football model. You can get to 6, 7, 8 teams better than them pretty quick. So Texas, it's not the end of the world. And here's the other thing. With the way the NCAA tournament is going to be structured, it's going to be so heavily weighted to giving advantage to power conference teams. Texas is fine. I don't think they're great. Didn't think they were a top 25 team. Ohio State looked the part, though. Credit to them. Really quickly, we've talked about the 2 top 25 teams that did get upset on Monday night. I keep wanting to say Saturday. Forgive me. I don't know what day it is. I was up till 1 a.m. watching college basketball. Forgive me, whatever. But the 3 teams that lost, Baylor lost, Texas lost, and Texas A&M lost. By the way, producer Matt, do we have the clip or no? I texted you late last night. Okay, listen, Torres doesn't really like to pat himself on the back too much. Lie. But I bring it up because when we did our top 25 reaction, I gave you 4 teams that I thought were underrated. The UCLAs, the Kentuckys, St. John's, who is unranked. I gave you a couple that were overrated as well. One was Texas. Here's what I had to say about Texas A&M. Last 2 years has been really hyped with largely the same core. 2 years ago, they were right on the fringes of the top 25, started 8-5. And they had a good back half of the season, big SEC play, NCAA tournament, all that good stuff. But they don't, they started 8-5. They struggled out of the gate. Last year, they were actually ranked 15th with, again, largely the same group of players. Guess what ended up happening? Started 9-4, basically won 0 meaningful out-of-conference games, and really had to rally once SEC play started. So I get the hype. I get why other people have them in the top 25. I'm just not going to put them there because at some point I need to see it early in the season. The AP poll is not supposed to be, and the AT poll too, the one that I do, is not supposed to be just who is the best, who's going to be the best by the end of the year. It's who's the best right now. And again, A&M has struggled out of the gate. I'll believe it when I see it. I do not have A&M in my top 25 to start. So that's what I had to say about Texas A&M back when we did the AP poll reaction. And, well, let's just say this. Texas A&M basically did exactly what I told you they were going to do. They lose at UCF, final score 64-61. Now, listen, UCF stormed the court. Thought that was a little aggressive. Not going to lie. Don't know that warrants it. But listen, UCF has not had a lot of basketball history. Credit to them. They had the moment, whatever. I just don't think Texas A&M is that good. Listen, one thing about, college basketball now is like you don't really have a lot of teams that kind of stay together over a 2, 3, 4 year period. Texas A&M has, though. And I said it in that clip. I'm just kind of over who Texas A&M is and who Texas A&M has been the last couple years. They don't shoot the 3 ball well. Outside of Wade Taylor, they don't have a lot of scoring, and that's exactly what happened on Monday night. They finished that game at UCF shooting from, by the way, how about this? 8 of 14 from the free throw line, but then 7 of 23, 30% from 3, and Wade Taylor struggled. And so Texas A&M is another one. I think it's like Texas. By the way, Texas A&M, for whatever reason, under Buzz Williams, never really plays well early in the season. And I just think the SEC is tough. I mean, I mentioned again, go through the teams. I don't think Texas A&M is better than Ole Miss. I don't think they're better than Alabama. I don't think they're better than Kentucky, Arkansas, Tennessee, Auburn, etc. Florida, I didn't mention, looked good on Monday night. So I think Texas A&M is what they are. Same team as before. I'm not really surprised. By the way, the only thing I have to say about UCF, wild collection of players. Okay, if you follow the prep recruiting stuff, Mikey Williams plays for UCF. Dior Johnson plays for UCF. JJ Taylor plays for UCF. There's some interesting names in that program. not trying to disparage, but if you know the recruiting backgrounds on some of those guys, kind of wild stuff. Credit UCF, though, they get the win. Listen, I'm not going to oversell the win. Bottom line, Big 12 is pretty darn tough. So Texas A&M loses. They are the third top 25 team that falls on Monday. Let's get to some other stuff. How about this? Let's go to the ACC. May have heard of a kid by the name of Cooper Flagg. Pretty good basketball player. Listen, I'll say this, man. Like, you can make fun of Duke, you can do this, you can do that. I thought that for the interest in college basketball, it was great what he did with Team USA this summer in terms of playing with the Team USA select team, playing against the NBA guys, and really kind of holding his own, because there is a spotlight and there is an interest on Duke. And so Cooper Flagg made his debut on Monday night. I'll be honest, I watched it. I thought it was interesting. So Cooper Flagg finishes the game against Maine, his home state school. By the way, John Shire, come on, sack up. Why didn't you go to Maine to play this game? This game should have been in Maine. For people who don't know, Cooper Flagg, number one high school player in America, originally from Maine. So they scheduled this game for Cooper Flagg, but did it at Duke. Go to Maine. Be a man, John Shire. Be a man. All right, let's get back to the game. Cooper Flagg, listen, finishes the game, 18 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals. And I think that's going to kind of be who he is. It was funny. I did a radio interview in San Diego. My good buddy John Schaefer had me on during this game. And he said, Torres, Cooper Flagg hasn't scored yet. What does it mean? And it's like, well, and that's not a knock on John or his co-host or whatever. But it's like Cooper Flagg is just not going to be that freshman that puts the team on his back from a strictly scoring perspective. Like, you think about some of the great freshmen in college basketball, Carmelo Anthony at Syracuse, even Paolo Banchero a few years ago. I remember seeing him in person for Duke. And it was like Paolo could just get you 18 and a half, could get you 29, 31, 34 in a college game. And that's just not who Cooper Flagg is. I actually thought early in the game he was trying a little too hard to get everybody else involved, almost like he felt like, hey, the spotlight is so big on me. Let's get some other people into what we're doing. And so he finishes the game. He plays really well. Finishes, as I said, with 18 points. 18 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals. I'll say this. The other freshmen actually look really good for Duke. The Con Knipple kid, he's kind of like a fringe 5-star, but you heard all summer long, like, oh, this kid has been way better than anybody thought. He looked the part, man. 22 points in this game, 3 3-pointers made, 4 rebounds as well. He was Duke's leading scorer. He looked really good. The Malawatch kid finished with 6 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 blocks. If you remember, he played for the South Sudan Olympic team. So it was funny because kind of during his recruitment, there was a lot of, he's a lot of high upside, but he's got some work to do. Well, I bring it up because he played at the Olympics and he played very confidently in Duke's exhibition win over Arizona State. So when I look at Duke, I think that it's really going to be the freshmen who carry them. And I'll say this, I'll give John Shire a little credit. I was joking about him before, but think he did a good job of finding older players who fit alongside Cooper Flagg. Mason Gillis, who was at Purdue last year, finished with 10 points. Malik Brown from Syracuse played 22 minutes. You could tell he's kind of that wing defender, low post defender, kind of a guy that can basically guard positions 2 through 4. So credit to Duke. I think they got a good team. Now, I think they're going to be tested against Kentucky. We're going to get to Kentucky in a minute because I think everybody does not realize quite how good Kentucky is. But yeah, Duke gets the win in Cooper Flagg's debut. And to me, I really do think it was more him trying to show that I'm not just a scorer, that I'm not just this, that I'm not just that. Duke gets the win. Team that didn't look too good in the ACC. Let's talk very quickly to the North Carolina Tar Heels. So North Carolina plays Elon. That's an in-state school in the state of North Carolina, obviously. And they get the win 90-76. And if you just looked at the box score, if you just looked at it on paper, you'd sit there and say, Torres, what's the big deal? They get the win. Who cares? Why are you making a big deal out of nothing? Well, here's the thing. If you watch the game, with about 6 minutes to go, Elon took a 71-69 lead in that game. And what ended up happening, RJ Davis comes down, hits a jumper. RJ Davis hits a 3 the next possession, a 5-0 run. Elon calls timeout, and they're never back in it. But, I mean, we're talking about late in the game. North Carolina was down to Elon before, that's kind of a crazy run now that I think about it. They were down 71-69. They end up winning 90-76. So that's a 21-5 run to end the game, if my math is correct off the top of my head. But look, I'm not going to overreact. It's game one. But the one thing we'll keep going back to is, do they have the low post guys? This is what we talked about during the offseason. It's what we talked about during the portal. They prioritized a bunch of big guys and got none of them. Cliff Omoyori ended up at Alabama. Jonas Adu ended up at Arkansas. A couple others. I know there was one marquee player they thought was going to enter the portal. They kind of banked everything on him entering the portal. He did not, and it was kind of scramble mode from there. So you look at North Carolina, the guards are fine. The guards are fine, but it's going to come down to, can you get enough out of the big guys? There are two big guys in the post, Jalen Withers and Jalen Washington, 18 points, 14 rebounds. I'll be honest, I don't know if that's going to be enough. Armando Bacot basically averaged that by himself last year. And so you need a little bit of a low post presence. So you don't want to freak out. Carolina gets the win. But the thing about Carolina, they're going to be tested. They're going to be tested early, starting on Friday. How about this? Carolina at Kansas Friday night. So if you got nothing to do, 7 p.m. Eastern time, Carolina will be at Kansas. And Kansas, obviously, especially in the front court with Hunter Dickinson, they got bodies and they got size. And I think Carolina is going to struggle with that. One more result from the ACC, because if I don't mention them, I'm going to get just chewed out up and down. Let's give credit to the Louisville Cardinals. Anytime I mention anyone other than Louisville, all my mentions become is Louisville fans. Torres, you hate our team. Why don't you talk about our team? Our team is all okay. Let's relax, Louisville fans. You're awesome. I will say you should be happy, man. Like, listen, I know we got a lot of big blue in this chat and that listen to this show, but here's the truth. I mean, they went through some pretty dark times at Louisville these last couple of years. I mean, it's easy to forget now, and Louisville fans, I'm not trying to rub it in, but I mean, you go back to last year. I mean, you talk about a team that not only finished 8-24, lost to Chattanooga in the early part of league play, or in the out-of-conference play, lost to DePaul, lost to Arkansas State, lost to a bunch of teams in ACC play. They lost to Lemoyne in an exhibition game a few years ago. So it's like, to come in against Morehead State and just beat the crap out of them, gotta feel good if you're a Louisville fan. Final score in this one was 93-45. Listen, this is who Pat Kelsey's team's going to be. They took a ton of threes. They actually didn't even shoot the ball that well, 11 of 36. But I've said it before, and I'll keep saying it. This is a team that, in my opinion, they got a lot of players that are really good college basketball players. This is going to be a tournament team. Javon Hadley was their leading scorer. He came from Colorado. Remember, Colorado made the tournament last year. They had 3-4 guys drafted off that team, as crazy as it sounds. Chucky Hepburn from Wisconsin. Also thought it was a big game from Terrence Edwards Jr. So those are your three best players. All three of them played in the NCAA tournament last year. So I don't want to oversell the Louisville thing. Louisville, like everybody else, they'll be tested early, including Saturday. They host Tennessee, which is kind of a crazy, just a crazy, afternoon game. I will say, not trying to be grumpy Torres here on a Tuesday, but kind of hate all these Saturday games in college hoops. We got Baylor in Arkansas. We got Baylor in Arkansas. We got Tennessee at Louisville. It's like, can we get some of these games on a Friday? Can we get some of them on a Thursday? Do they all have to be on Saturday when we got college football going on? So I'll tell you what, credit to Louisville. They get the win. Louisville improves to 1-0, and I think you got to be happy with where things are at. Let's get to some other results. Before I do, make sure you drop your comments, your thoughts from day one of the college hoop season in the comment section. By the way, obviously, we will prioritize any super chats. So if you have any super chats, feel free to drop them in. But let's get to the rest of day one of college basketball. And let me start by talking about a team that, if I give them too much credit, everybody's going to get mad. But let's go to the Kentucky Wildcats, okay? Because, listen, I understand that anytime I say anything positive about Kentucky, who have they played? What does it matter? Why do you care, Torres? It doesn't mean anything. They're playing the YMCA teams. Okay, I get it. But as I always say on this show, my old buddy, Arnie Spanier, my former radio co-host, what did he always tell me? This is one of my favorite lessons in life and in radio. He's got a gravelly voice, still does radio for Fox Sports Radio. He always said, Torres, the show's tonight. And what that means is I can't react to what could happen 10 years down the road or 10 days down the road, right? We can't say, well, if the Chiefs lose this game or if they lose that game, then they aren't going to be good. But they keep winning. So can we stop? It's like the Detroit Lions. It's like, well, I mean, what happens if? No, they're the best team in the NFL right now, or the best team in the NFC. And so Kentucky, they host Wright State. I know Kentucky's season and the Mark Pope era is not going to be defined by a game against Wright State on opening night. But again, if you're a Kentucky fan, I don't know how it's not hard. I don't know how it's not impossible to be excited about a 103-62 victory to open the Mark Pope era. And it's funny. First of all, I did see all the numerology or whatever of Mark Pope, of course, war number 41. They win by 41 on their opening night. They gave him like a commemorative bourbon barrel, which I thought was a little aggressive, but hey, he's one of theirs. I get it, whatever. But listen, I'm going to say what I keep saying about Kentucky until I'm proven wrong. This is not the number 23 team in the country. There are not 23 teams in this league better than them. There are not 8 teams in the SEC better than them. I'm sorry, there just aren't, okay? And I know it's Wright State, and we don't want to overreact, but what I saw in this game is what I saw in the 2 exhibitions, and that is a fluid, confident, experienced team that I think is going to win a lot of games. When I look at this game, first of all, the 3-point shooting, we talked about it all summer as this roster is getting put together. Well, guess what ended up happening? 11 of 24 shooting from 3. It's actually probably less than most games. Mark Pope has said we want to shoot 30 plus threes in most of our games. So Wright State actually did a pretty good job of running them off the 3-point line, but they finished 11 of 24. Kobe Brea, the best 3-point shooter statistically in college basketball last year, alongside Reed Sheppard, 4 for 4. He did the Steph Curry shoot it, turn around before it goes in. And they just looked the part. And I think when I look at this Kentucky team and I look at who they are and I look at, this win against Wright State, there are 2 things, and I've talked to Kentucky fans all the time, 2 things that really stand out to me about this team, okay? The first one, it is the offense. And I know that statistically, Kentucky had one of the best offenses last year, led the nation in 3-point shooting. I just think it was a byproduct. They had some really good shooters, Antonio Reeves, Reed Sheppard, whatever. This year, it is so obvious that the offensive system, and I'm not an X's and O's expert, I don't claim to be, but it is built and it is designed on spacing and 3-point shooting, and every guy in that system and in that offense is confident, knows what they're supposed to do, knows where they're supposed to be. I mean, that was the thing that really stood out, was the number of guys, and really the first 3 games, the number of guys who catch, the guys running out at them, pump fake, move over, half a step, wide open 3. It's inherent. It's natural. These guys are very confident playing this way. And then the other thing that really stands out about Kentucky too, and this comes from watching a lot of games from the previous era, is that last year there were all sorts of injuries. You never felt like there was a comfortable rotation. Now, some of that was out of the control of the coach, but this year, what stands out to me, every single substitution has a purpose, right? If Lamont Butler is in, Kirk Kriisa is not in. Kirk Kriisa was recruited to be Lamont Butler's backup. So when Lamont Butler comes out, Kirk Kriisa comes in. I haven't looked at the math. I'm sure there's probably a minute or 2 where they have played together, but for the most part, it's like when Lamont's in, Kerr's out. When Kerr's out, Lamont's in. Same with the big guys. They have 2 true 5 men, Amari Williams and Brandon Garrison. Brandon Garrison isn't on the floor with Amari Williams very much, if at all. So everything is intentional. Everything is purposeful. By the way, I will mention Amari Williams looked awesome. Amari Williams looked awesome in that game. What was it? 12 points, 13 rebounds, something like that. He did finish, in fact, with 12 points and 13 rebounds. This was a kid we talked about in the portal. This was the first commit of the Mark Pope era. And that tells you everything you need to know. Mark Pope prioritized this kid over everybody else in the portal, 7-foot center from Drexel. And you can see why Mark Pope was so excited about this kid, what he brings to the table, who he is, how he protects the rim. And I'll tell you, he didn't play in the second exhibition. You could see a difference in this team. And that is a kid that you are going to need over the course of the season. You're going to play Jonas Adu at Arkansas. Gonzaga has a bunch of big guys. That is a 7-footer that you're going to need. He looked the part. I think the other thing that stood out, like I said, Kobe Brea played well. Overall, they had 6 players in double figures. That tends to happen when you get to 103 points. Ansley Almanor, a player that we talked about a little bit when he committed 11 points off the bench. And that's what I'm talking about. That kid committed to be like the ninth man. And he understood that was going to be his role and what he's about and who he's supposed to be. And so credit to Kentucky. They get the win. I'm not going to oversell it. The one thing I will say, though, is this. Because, again, this is what drives me crazy about the internet. I sort of get it, but it also just drives me insane. Is that, you can't give anybody credit for beating a bad team. And so, as I said, I know that until they actually get a win against a quality team, we're not allowed to give them credit. But I'll tell you this, I had Duke and Kentucky side by side. Duke clearly has a lot of high upside NBA type talent. Cooper Flagg, the Malawatch kid, Con Knipple, they got good players, but they didn't look as fluid. They didn't look as confident. They didn't look as purposeful in what they were doing. And so I'm just going to tell you, we'll preview that game on next Monday night. That game is Tuesday. By the way, Kentucky fans, producer Matt will be there interviewing UK fans on the street. If you want to be interviewed, raise your hands in the chat, DM me. We'll get you set up with producer Matt. But I just bring it up because I just loved who they were and how they looked and the way that they played. Kentucky gets the opening night win. And again, you don't want to get too excited. They have Duke next week, but I think Duke is going to be the game where people realize, like, oh my goodness, this team is actually probably a lot better than people realized. I've said it all fall. If they're the 23rd best team in college basketball, like the AP poll indicates, well, guess what? Then if they're the 23rd best team in college basketball, then this is the best season of college basketball we've ever had. Really quickly, let's stay in the SEC. Alabama, I'm batting my eyelashes. I am in awe of the Alabama Crimson Tide basketball team. Okay, so Alabama opening night, final score in their game 110-54. So how does Alabama come, open a season, the most anticipated season in school history, coming off of a Final Four? Oh, with a cool 56-point win. And with Alabama, man, first of all, it's crazy to me. I still go back to 4 or 5 years ago in the pre-Nate Oates era. I guess it was 6, 7 years ago at this point. But my buddy Ryan Fowler hosts radio in Tuscaloosa. He would not let me talk Alabama basketball on his show. He was like, no. We ain't talking basketball. We'll stick to football, Torres. Let's break down the LSU game or the Auburn game or whatever. Now, he actually texted me during this game. He said, can you come on Wednesday or Tuesday, a day early, so we can do some football, but some basketball as well? I said, no, because I got to go vote, civic duty, whatever. Alabama is so good, okay? And I tweeted this out. Alabama, I said it, and I mean it. They're Noah's Ark. They have two of everything. Like two, name, and I said this when the roster came together in the spring. I named them the number one team in the country. And by the way, Alabama fans, I'm going to own this. I chickened out. I didn't pick them to win a national championship. I'm a freaking idiot because that's the best team that I saw all day on Monday. Now listen, UConn didn't play, Arkansas didn't play. There's BYU didn't play. There's a few teams that haven't played, but I am here to tell you that team is so good. First of all, this is all you need to know about the game. Okay, this is a game in which Mark Sears was really good, 20 points. But the difference is, if Mark Sears wasn't great last year, there were games that you just couldn't get the job done because of the way the defense couldn't get stops. Well, you hold UNC Asheville, and I know we don't want to overreact to a UNC Asheville game. You hold UNC Asheville to 54 points in this game, 6 of 26 shooting. They revamped the staff. Nate Oates had an opening, and he said, I got to get me a defensive guy. And I think there is a total difference in how they play on the defensive side of the basketball. The defensive side of the court. I was going to say defensive side of the field. Wrong sport. Beyond that, I think it's very interesting. 2 blocks for Cliff Omoyori. Listen, this is what stood out, is that last year, Alabama didn't have a paint presence, okay? There was no paint presence for Alabama. You got past the guards. The next thing you know, you're finishing at the rim because, no disrespect to Grant Nelson, they just didn't have that big guy. Well, Cliff Omoyori comes in. He finishes his Alabama regular season debut as the team's second leading scorer, 16 points in this game, 8 rebounds, 2 blocks. You know who really impressed me, Alabama fans? And I saw Nate Oates gave him the Hard Hat Award for the toughest player of the game. Aiden Sherrill, the true freshman. Another guy, I know his history, and he was highly rated. I was not familiar with this kid's game. Okay, he's listed at like 6'9", 6'10". That kid's got to be a solid 7'1". He's huge. He is huge. He covers a lot of ground. He's athletic. And he did all the little things in this game. Like, you talk about a guy that I don't think he's going to be a breakout guy this year, but he will be a backup. And then next year, probably a star on this team and in this program. 6 points, 9 rebounds in his Alabama debut. I'm telling you, man, that kid is big and he's good. The other thing that stood out, the guards out. Well, first of all, Jaren Stevenson, he's an NBA player. Like, a couple things stood out. The depth, Aiden Sherrill. Jaren Stevenson's just an NBA player. 6'10", hangs out on the wing, shoots threes. He's a bucket. He was great in the tournament last year. But then beyond Jaren Stevenson, the other thing was the guards. Is that Mark Sears had to do a lot last year. I don't think as much is going to be on his plate. You know who actually really impressed me? Producer Matt, cover your ears. Producer Matt's an Auburn guy. Aiden Holloway played really well. Aiden Holloway was a guy who could not shoot last year at Auburn. Now, if you remember, when he left Auburn and he committed to Alabama, he said something to the effect of, I just want to play for a coach who believes in me. Not the greatest endorsement of Bruce Pearl, but we love Bruce Pearl on this show, so we're not taking sides. And I'd probably take Coach Pearl's side on that one, but that's neither here nor there. But Aiden Holloway looked really good. He finished with 11 points. He actually played 24 minutes off the bench, so they really played their guards a lot. Also had 4 rebounds, 2 assists. He hit a couple threes. The other thing that stood out, like, again, the shooting was really good. He played well, and then LeBaron Philon played well as well. This was a 4-star guard, was committed to Kansas, decommits and goes to Alabama. And I'll be honest, I thought the kid was going to essentially be a redshirt candidate. Like, I didn't think he was going to play. Oh, no, he looks the part. I know I've said that like 8 times on today's show, but the kid looks really good. Another one, I just was not as familiar with his game. I knew the background. I knew how good he was, but 10 points and 9 assists in his debut. So just think about that. Mark Sears scores 20. Omayori scores 15 with a near double-double. Your backup center has 9 boards off the bench. Your secondary point guard finishes with 9 assists. Your third point guard, 24 minutes off the bench. I don't know how Nate Oates is getting all these guys minutes. And by the way, didn't even mention Jaren Stevenson, Grant Nelson, who only had 2 points, in 15 minutes in this game. I'm telling you, man, I'm telling you, I said it in the spring. I'll say it again. Alabama basketball, they are Noah's Ark. They got 2 of everything. I haven't even mentioned the 3-point shooting, which they only took 18 3-pointers. Shows you they can be a different team, but they looked awesome. They get the win. 6 players in double figures for Alabama as well. 7 players in double figures, Alabama's the best team that I saw. Period. End of story. Somebody just said in the chat they're a well-oiled machine. Really quickly, just want to hit on 2 more teams, 2 or 3 more, and then we will get to an interesting recruiting note that could have big-time ripple effects. UCLA, they looked really good. UCLA, remember, last year, they lost basically their whole team to graduation. They tried to go heavy in the international game. They couldn't, and they did it. It did not work out. Remember, Mick Cronin went on that famous rant where he said, we're behind in NIL. We're the Cincinnati Reds. We need to be the Los Angeles Dodgers. Well, what ends up happening, he basically, listen, I don't know if he said it publicly, but privately, he's just telling people, yeah, we had to raise money. We had to buy players. That's what we had to do. Well, you look at them. UCLA was the best team I saw out of the Big Ten on Tuesday night. They get an 85-50 win. What's crazy about them, they brought in probably 5 or 6 marquee transfers. The best one that I saw, Tyler Bilodeau from Oregon State, 18 points, 6 boards, 2 steals. So you just talk about a team that is going to be deep. Eric Daly on the wing looked really good. Sky Clark, remember that name, as their starting point guard. He began his career at Illinois, went to Louisville. He was committed to Kentucky at one point. But UCLA looked like the best team in the Big Ten to me. They improve to 1-0. Speaking of the Big Ten, got to give credit to the Must Bus, Eric Musselman. They win by 26 in his debut. I said it when we did our reaction to the AP poll. They were picked to finish 14th out of 18 teams, tied for 12th, but the way the numbers work, they were basically 14th in the preseason poll. I said, Eric Musselman, he ain't ever finished 14th in anything. And if you followed his career at Nevada, at Arkansas, he is going to be successful there. They get the 77-51 victory in a game where, again, they look good, man. They look good. They struggled early out of the gate, but looked good. Finally, I'll give a little small school shout out. Let's give a little small school shout out. South Dakota State. They played McNeese. Okay. Now we're McNeese Cowboys on this show. Cowboy the F up, as the Boston Red Sox used to say. But McNeese, they're coached by Will Wade, and they've been kind of a media darling this offseason. Bring back everybody off a 30-win team, hit the portal hard. I think everybody thinks Will Wade is going to get one of those big-time jobs that opens up this offseason. And I only bring it up because McNeese came in with so much hype. South Dakota State, who lost their best player, remember they lost the Conference Player of the Year. Zeke Mayo transferred to Kansas. South Dakota State gets the win. And it was funny. I was watching this game. Again, credit to the Field of 68. I thought they did a hell of a job producing the crap out of the 3 games that they covered in the state of South Dakota. But you watch this game, and listen, I'm not going to break down South Dakota State, but everybody was picking McNeese. People were saying McNeese, and I was one of them. Like, are they a top 25-ish type team? And so for them to now go ahead and South Dakota State get the win, and I think what I'll say really quickly about South Dakota State, I think they are what's going to kind of become of mid-majors. And I thought Douster and the guys did a good job of talking about this on the broadcast. Is their basic recruiting pitch right now at South Dakota State is essentially like, look, come here. We're going to put you in position early to succeed. And if you have success, we're going to help you move on to the next spot. It's not what any mid-major wants to do, but it's kind of what you have to do, right? And so you look at, remember, they had Baylor Shireman, went to Creighton, became a first-team All-Big East guy, was a first-round pick of the Boston Celtics. Last year, Zeke Mayo transfers to Kansas. And so they just keep replenishing, keep reloading. They redshirt guys. They get the win against McNeese. By the way, I kind of criticized McNeese there. Let me give them half a second of credit to very simply say, credit to them. They flew across the country. They played South Dakota State in South Dakota. If you watched any of the games, the first 2 games, there was, probably 25% capacity. That game was probably at 80 to 85% capacity. So Will Wade, American gangster, I still think he is a great coach, but we got to give South Dakota State a little bit of small school love. All right. Lastly, before we get out of here, there was one very big piece of recruiting news that I do want to get to because it does have big picture ripple effects, not only with what happened on Monday night, but what could happen in the class of 2025. And so let's take a moment to chat about Xavier Staten, a top 25 prospect in the class of 2025, who made his commitment on Monday night. Really interesting story, kind of a very late rising player. If you actually watch the live stream, Adam Finkelstein, who does as good of a job as anybody covering college basketball recruiting, he did a good job of laying it out. He's like, dude, this is my job. I'm on the road, 50 weeks a year. And I had never even heard of you until like a year and a half ago. But he's a 7'1" center, class of 2025. He's from Vegas. His recruitment blew up like, dynamite over the course of the summer and was down to 4 schools: Stanford, Michigan, UNLV. He's from Vegas, the local school, and the BYU Cougars. Well, as you can see on the screen, BYU picks up the commitment, top 25 kid, second kid in this class. And I'll tell you what, it is continuing the BYU recruiting momentum from the summer. And oh, by the way, they ain't done yet in 2025. So over the summer, they get Yegor Demin. Over the summer, they get Cannon Catchings. Now, the first mega piece for 2025. And as I said, I don't think they're done. In terms of Xavier Staten, listen, I said it a minute ago, really talented player. Like some guys just jump off the film when you watch him. He's another one. He's like Aiden Sherrill, I said a minute ago. Listed at 6'10", kid's like 7'1". He's huge, but he's crazy athletic. And it's so funny, the stuff that you remember as you prep. But I remember years ago when I was at UConn, this was a million years ago, UConn had a kid named Josh Boone who ended up being a first-round NBA pick. And I'm not even saying Xavier Staten's like him. But this kid was 6'11", ended up being a first-round pick, played in the NBA for 5, 6, 7 years. I think he might be still playing in Australia. But I remember one time watching a workout with a buddy of mine. My buddy was like, Torres, do you understand how hard it is to find kids that are 6'11", 7 feet that run and move and jump like him? It's all natural. It comes naturally. It's not forced. There's a lot of kids that are 6'9", 6'10", 6'11" that play basketball because they're 6'9", 6'10", 6'11". This is a kid that plays basketball because he's really good at it, really skilled, and his best basketball is ahead. And so for BYU to lock him in, listen, credit to Kevin Young, credit to that staff, because they are selling what I think is an awesome sales pitch, okay? And every time we talk BYU, I'm going to keep saying it because Kevin Young said it on this show. Everybody only wants to talk about NIL. That is not – the NIL is part of everything, okay? But what Kevin Young is doing is he's basically saying a couple things. He's saying, one, I'm a former NBA assistant. I was interviewing for NBA head coaching jobs. That's not Torres' opinion. That's not Kevin Young's opinion. You can go find it on Woj's Twitter feed. He was, Kevin Young was interviewing for NBA head coaching jobs. He chose BYU. So you're going to come to BYU. It's going to be a family environment. It's going to be a college environment, but it's going to be a pro environment as well. And we've talked about it before. NBA training, NBA nutrition, NBA strength training, NBA meal prep, whatever. But then also, and we've talked about this as well, because I get this question all the time, the honor code. I asked Kevin Young about it, and he said, look, what we tell kids, especially ones that we believe have a chance to play in the NBA and play in the NBA after a year or two of college basketball, we tell them, come here. There will be no distractions. And if you come here and if you, there's going to be no distractions, you can focus fully on basketball. And if you do that, there's going to be no questions about you once you get to the NBA. No questions about how you'll handle nightlife, women, money, whatever, because you handle it all at BYU and you came through and you did well. And so Kevin Young said it. We're a serious place. We're about basketball. That's part of how they got Jaeger Demon. That's part of how they got Cannon Catchings. And so that is part of how they got Xavier Staten too. This is a kid, I believe, if things go well and things go to plan, and I think they're going to because he's really good, this is a kid that I could see being an NBA draft pick in a year from now. We'll see. It's early. He's quote-unquote only a 4-star, but this kid is a fast riser, and I am here to tell you, just watch the film on this kid. It absolutely pops off the tape. And again, credit to Kevin Young. Just one big recruiting win after another since he took the job. Also worth noting, there's a couple other recruiting wins that may be coming down the pike, okay? So we've obviously talked a lot about AJ DeBonsa on this show the last couple weeks. We did 2 separate clips on him. Both of them have done 20,000+ views, so you kind of know where I stand on him. But AJ DeBonsa is the #1 high school player in America. He's down to 7 schools. He's taken all of his visits. Last week, the first crystal ball at 24/7 Sports came in, and I'm here to tell you, I truly believe in my heart of hearts, right now, BYU's got to feel really good, okay? AJ DeBonsa plays high school ball in Utah. He's been to campus a few times, took an unofficial over the summer, took an official a few weeks ago. He's all about basketball. And again, I think that NBA system is really appealing to him. I think, oh, by the way, the chance to play with some really good players is very appealing to him. Xavier Staten is committed. It's worth noting, and I've said this a bunch of times, BYU is the only school that is recruiting both AJ DeBonsa and his high school teammate, JJ Mandequit. Now, I don't get that because if you follow recruiting, JJ Mandequit was the starting point guard on the Team USA team that won every game by like 90 points this summer with Cam Boozer and Jalen Harrelson and AJ DeBonsa and whatever. But I just bring it up because they're the only ones recruiting the teammate. And he loves playing with them, and he's close to campus. And I've said it, and I'll keep saying it. I think BYU's in good shape. I think what'll be interesting, and I think not only is BYU in good shape, what they got to do, though, and this is just my personal opinion, you got to close the deal. Because if you follow this recruitment, you know that AJ DeBonsa's dad has said many times that he does not plan, or he said over the summer, he doesn't plan on committing until February of 2025. Basically, there's no rush, there's no this, there's no that, there's no whatever. What'll be interesting, we're recording this about 3 p.m. Eastern time here on Tuesday, so there might be news coming out here soon. I don't think that timeline holds up anymore. I think he is going to commit early, probably by the end of November, so he can sign in the early signing period. I'm here to tell you, I think he's going to end up at BYU. Now, could somebody make a last-minute pitch or a last-minute NIL thing or a last-minute this or a last-minute that? Yeah, they could. But I don't know that it's going to happen. Right now, if I had to guess, like I know Kansas State has been very active kind of in the NIL recruiting space. He liked North Carolina. Obviously, the Jordan Brand stuff is very appealing. Alabama, everything that Alabama does is appealing. But again, you're holding a gun to my head. I'm here to tell you, I think AJ Debonsa is going to end up at BYU. By the way, I think it'll be great for college basketball to have him at BYU. It is worth noting, by the way, because people are going to say this is different than the Mark Pope era. Mark Pope, for most of his career, was recruiting to the WCC. It's different, whatever. We don't have to get into that. But I would feel really good about AJ Debonsa eventually being a BYU Cougar, and maybe sooner rather than later. Should mention, by the way, we'll be making my first ever trip to the Marriott Center later this year. Cannot wait to see BYU in person when they play Kansas in February. Really quick, producer Matt, before we get out of here, any interesting questions? Maybe we do one or two, if especially if there was any super chats or anything. But if there isn't, that's okay. We can get out of here. We did an hour of content here, and by the way, I appreciate the live chat. I think a lot of people probably, let's put it this way, need a distraction on a day like today. So I'll tell you what, producer Matt, we'll get out of here. We can always save questions for another show. So we'll go ahead and get out of here. If you're not subscribed to the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast, please make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you get podcasts, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to rate and review the show. Go ahead, give us a quick 5 stars. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, all that good stuff. Make sure you're following on social media at Aaron_Torres on Twitter, at Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. Thank you to our partners, Cauley Puffs. For more information, try them out for yourself. Visit CauleyPuffs.com. You're going to like them. It's time for me to go. Appreciate everybody's support. We will get out of here. I have a question on Caleb Wilson. Maybe we address that on the next episode. 5-star wing down to basically Kentucky, North Carolina, and Arkansas. Maybe we do that on the next episode. Tell you what, time to go. Appreciate everybody's support. See y'all later this week. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Redick. You F-head. Unblock me, bro. I'll be back Thursday.